It was 1 year ago yesterday that CM Punk made his return to professional wrestling at the United Center in Chicago. After 7 years away, he made his AEW debut, and it has largely been a positive for the company. Don't let anybody tell you that up to this point, oh, it's been such a failure, oh, it's been such a negative. It has largely been a positive for AEW. People were excited to see this man back. Wrestlers and the company were excited to work with him. I know he's given advice to a lot of the younger talents that have come up to him behind the scenes. He's had great matches with Darby Allin, Eddie Kingston, MJF, Hangman Page, Dax Harwood. Punk has said he thinks the match he had with Dax is the most perfect match that he's ever had. That's how highly he thinks of that match. I'm sure he and Tanahashi would have had a memorable one at Forbidden Door had he not broken his foot. And think of all the names that he still hasn't even touched since he came back. Kenny Omega, Bryan Danielson, who I know he's dying to work with, Adam Cole. There's lots of other big matches waiting for him. Tony Khan would tell you that Punk has increased business for them. Maybe not television ratings outside of that first week, but in a lot of other ways, like pay-per-view business, the company is bigger today than it was a year ago when Punk first arrived, and he definitely played a role in that. You cannot deny that. Tony has called him the biggest part of financial success in the history of AEW. He said no one person has ever made more of a positive impact. He might be singing a different tune after this week. There was major news coming out of Dynamite with the announcement that the championship unification match between Punk and Jon Moxley, which was slated for All Out, will instead be taking place on Dynamite this Wednesday. Punk against Moxley, that's the biggest possible match that AEW can do right now. Champion against champion unification, and they're giving it away on free television on 1 week's notice. And if it feels like it's being done on short notice, that's because it is. At least according to Fightful, it was a late decision made by Tony Khan. This is not something that was planned and mapped out for weeks and everything is just playing out exactly the way it was originally expected to play out. This was a late call by Tony Khan. Now, the question, of course, is why would he make a late call to bump the matchup? That we don't know. But Eric Bischoff once did the same thing with Goldberg and Hollywood Hogan on Nitro, but they were in front of 40,000 people at the Georgia Dome. And Bischoff was desperate for a win because WCW was starting to get thumped by WWE. I think it's insane to hotshot their first meeting 11 days before the pay-per-view. I mean, they could always run it back at All Out. In fact, I kind of expect them to do that. But you're still giving away that first one-on-one encounter. And you're doing it with all the commercial breaks that come with delivering a long match like this on live television. But since then, we have learned some things that are going on behind the scenes that may have played a part in the decision to bump up the match. And if any of this is true, it is not good. It's not good if you are Tony Khan having to deal with all of this. If you're a fan, I think it makes for great drama. As somebody said in the live chat on the stream the other night, TNT, we love drama, right? I love drama too. I love me some good drama. It's a podcaster's delight. Are you kidding me? But there's a lot of drama right now centered around the AEW World Champion, and that is not good for AEW. I cannot imagine that Tony Khan would give this match away early unless he has a damn good reason for doing so. I thought maybe Hangman Page might factor into things after the way Punk bitched him out on TV on Wednesday. Maybe he would, I don't know if he would interfere, but maybe coming out of it, he would be involved in some way. They'd make it a triple threat at the pay-per-view. None of that appears to be the case. At all. Well, I'll have more on that in a moment. That leaves one other scenario, and that is the return of MJF. MJF has been missing since the post-Double or Nothing episode of Dynamite where he called Tony Khan a fucking mark. It was CM Punk during the commercial break who hobbled to the ring on a foot that he didn't know yet was shattered to chase MJF off into the crowd, and he has not been seen since. That is not the only history between Punk and MJF. MJF has a win over Punk in Chicago earlier this year and a loss to Punk in their dog collar match at Revolution. They're 1-1. And I've been saying ever since then that it's CM Punk who MJF should defeat to win his first AEW World Championship. They have been waiting for Punk to come back. Now he's back. And now it is safe for MJF to poke his head back out again. But that could all be in jeopardy if the wrestling news websites are to be believed, and I am including reputable ones like PW Insider and Fightful in there. This isn't just coming from pistachionutwrestlingwrapup.net. We have to take it all the way back to the start of the show on Wednesday, which saw CM Punk come to the ring for a promo. But before he said anything about Jon Moxley, his next opponent, he decided to take some shots at the former champion, Hangman Adam Page, who he won the title from at Double or Nothing back in May. He said there was someone in the area, or someone from the area, because I guess Hangman grew up not far from where they were on Wednesday. There was someone from the area that he wanted to challenge to a rematch, and he dared Hangman to come to the ring right now and fight him for the championship. And it seemed very odd, even the announcers were kind of taken off guard by this, because Hangman has barely even been mentioned since he lost the title. I mean, Hangman was there, but he did not come out. And then Punk gave him some advice. He said, the public apology needs to be as loud as the disrespect. He said, that's not cowboy shit, that's coward shit. He completely buried the guy. Especially when he didn't come out because he wasn't scheduled to come out. And Punk knew that he wasn't scheduled to come out because allegedly Punk went into business for himself. And what he said about Hangman was not planned. It wasn't that it wasn't scripted, because they don't use scripts in AEW, but it wasn't planned. And there are said to be real issues between the two dating back to the promos that Hangman cut on Punk leading into their match. Now, when I did the Dynamite post-show, I said it makes sense if you remember what I said about those promos at the time. When Hangman was talking about Punk, I joked about how angry Hangman was, seemingly for no apparent reason. Even Punk said to him, I don't know why you're so angry. I don't know why you're taking this so personally. And he was right. It didn't really make sense. Hangman was basically calling Punk a wolf in sheep's clothing. Someone not to be trusted. Someone who is not in it to help. He's in it to help himself. He's not in it to help anybody else. He's a fraud. That's basically what he was saying. And Page said it was his job to save AEW from CM Punk. Punk had never done anything on camera to play into this idea that he had some sort of hidden agenda. It just felt like it came from a place where it was kind of being forced, and it just very weird. But others like MJF and Eddie Kingston, they made similar comments about Punk in their promos. So either this is the greatest slow build to a heel turn that I have ever seen, or, and actually, I don't know if it'll be better than Brett in 97, but either this is going to be a long burn to a heel turn, or these men were right all along about CM Punk, and Punk really is not as well liked as we would be led to believe that he is backstage. Things aren't as harmonious as AEW would like for everybody to believe that things are behind the scenes. We know FTR loves him. Maybe everybody else in the locker room isn't as fond of him as Dax and Cash. Evidently, Punk did not take kindly to those words in those promos that Hangman cut. I know in the go-home promo to Double or Nothing, Hangman brought up workers' rights and kind of threw that in Punk's face, and that was a strange thing for him to say. And then it was never mentioned again. But there's also the 800-pound elephant in the room that is Colt Cabana. We know the falling out those two had, and what has happened to Colt since Punk arrived, and a lot of people in the company are not happy about it. You don't have to be a summa cum laude graduate to know that the reason Colt Cabana was excommunicated from the Dark Order and banished to Ring of Honor is because of CM Punk. And Tony Khan wanting to make his biggest star happy. Tony Khan will bend over backwards to make CM Punk happy. He practically melted down during the post-show scrum after Double or Nothing when someone brought up comments that Eric Bischoff had made about Punk. So if Punk wanted Cabana gone, or if Tony thought that he and Colt sharing a locker room might make for an uncomfortable situation for Punk, who do you think he's going to move heaven and earth to please? I'm sure most of the locker room is not happy about the Cabana stuff. I know he's very well liked. The Young Bucks are very tight with him also, and they're EVPs in the company. In fact, Colt has said that after the EVPs, he was the only other person to know about the formation of AEW before it even became official. But per Fightful Select, this is what Fightful said. Punk defeated Hangman at Double or Nothing earlier this year, before being forced away from the ring for several months. Before that, however, there was word that Punk and Hangman did not see eye to eye on some promo material that emerged on an episode of Dynamite that built to their match. Fightful has been told that it was to the point that CM Punk met with AEW higher-ups about the context of Page's promo. Voices of Wrestling had noted that they had heard that Punk told others after the meeting in May that he would not lose to Hangman Page. The belief among several on the roster that we spoke with was that Punk believed Hangman went into business for himself, and that Punk may have seen the August 17th promo this week as a receipt. It is important to note that was locker room speculation as opposed to Punk telling anybody that directly. From Punk's end of things, the Hangman promo had alluded to Punk's issues with Colt Cabana and happened during a week where Punk was not at the show, while Punk's shot at Hangman happened with Hangman present. And Brian Alvarez on Wrestling Observer Live added this to the story. He said there were a few people furious at CM Punk backstage because Hangman is well-liked. So they're mad at Punk. Also, you have people who are on Punk's side who say Hangman started this. So they're mad that you're mad at CM Punk. It was started when Hangman was unprofessional, and CM Punk followed that up by making Hangman look like a fool. This sounds so juvenile. Well, he started it first, like a couple of fucking kids. Not good. Fightful took things even further by claiming that Punk has been expressing his displeasure behind the scenes so blatantly that some in AEW thought he might actually quit. CM Punk walking out on a company. I've never heard of such a thing. Fightful points out that they haven't been given any reason to believe that Punk would leave the company, but they have been told by one AEW veteran that they have heard threats have been levied, or that threats have been levied by Punk. I don't know what's real and what isn't with this story. Okay, nobody does. I don't think anybody who's reporting on this story in good faith, and there could be some good legitimate information in these stories. Again, we're talking about websites in some cases that I trust, that I look to as some of the more reliable ones in the wrestling community. Nobody knows for sure exactly what is going on. If it is all an elaborate work, it certainly has people talking. But if it is, then there are a lot of people in the back who have not been clued into that fact. And that's the sort of shit that WCW would do all the time. They would work the boys. And it created a very toxic, very distrustful environment behind the scenes. That is not what AEW needs. AEW does not need to become a second coming of WCW when it started to go down the fucking tubes. If it isn't a work, and Punk really is upset, I don't know what he has to be so upset about. From day one that he walked in the door, Tony Khan has rolled out the red carpet for this man. He went over on Darby Allin. He went over on Eddie Kingston. He ultimately went over on MJF. He went over on Hangman Page. He became the AEW World Champion. CM Punk has had a very charmed run so far outside of the injury that he himself caused. In the year that he has been in AEW, everything he hated about WWE, he has had the opposite in AEW. He has had freedom here that he did not have working for Vince McMahon, and a much easier road schedule, probably a lot more money. CM Punk is the last person who has anything to complain about in this company. At least as far as him and his creative and his character is concerned. Maybe he has issues with other aspects of Tony Khan's booking. Maybe that's frustrating to him. I don't know. But as far as CM Punk on CM Punk, he has nothing to complain about. He has nothing to be upset about. If Tony Khan fears that CM Punk could walk out on him, it's possible that that late decision to bump up the match with him and Moxley could be his way of getting the belt off Punk now because things are starting to boil over and he doesn't want to take any chances. There is a very real possibility that Jon Moxley could walk out of Cleveland this week as the unified AEW World Champion. I don't think he will, but I also wouldn't dismiss it. Maybe there is no major angle plan. Maybe this was a panic move. Maybe he pushed the panic button. I mean, it was just thrown out there casually by Excalibur late in the show in the normal course of him speed reading through all of the match announcements that he does every week. It almost makes me wonder if the decision was made so late that it was made during the show, after the opening segment. And then they kind of said, okay, mention the fact that next week we're going to do the match then. You know, Dynamite this week averaged 957,000 overnight viewers on TBS. And the second lowest demo number since moving to TBS in January. If they can't do at least 1 million this week, and really they should do a lot more than 1 million viewers for their biggest match, if they can't do that this Wednesday, that is a very troublesome sign. 957,000 is not a bad number. But if you're going to put out CM Punk and Jon Moxley in a championship unification match on Dynamite this week, and you can't pull well over 1 million viewers, that's not good. You know, before all this stuff broke about bigger problems with Punk, you know, when I thought it was just about Punk giving Hangman a receipt for what he said about him before, I didn't have any issue with it. I think it creates some drama and tension on the shows. I think it makes the shows more interesting. If Hangman got punked out this week, then you know what? The next time he gets a live mic on TV, I think he should give it right back to CM Punk. Not everybody needs to be best friends, singing fucking Kumbaya in the back and roasting marshmallows together. But if there's bigger issues with Punk and he's cranky because he hasn't had his diaper changed, the best thing for Tony Khan to do is to get these guys in a room together to air this shit out before it gets out of hand, and then we end up with the Chicago screwjob. You know, when you're dealing with a lot of egos, it's a delicate thing. There's a time to be a fan and a cheerleader for these people, as Tony Khan is, and a time to step up and be a leader. And if this is not a work and the tensions here are very real, it's time to step up and lead, because you don't want this to spiral out of control. That's the last thing you want. Especially at a time when WWE has all of this momentum. Oh, Triple H has taken over. And Triple H, of course, worked with all these people in NXT, and they love him and they sing his praises. And now they're more open to coming to WWE or coming back to WWE. The pendulum might be swinging the other way now. This is the worst time for something like this to be happening. Wouldn't it be something if what Hangman said about Punk turns out to be true, about him having to protect AEW from him? I don't know if it's art imitating life or life imitating art. I would hope that isn't the case. And it would be a hell of an angle if this was all designed to lead to a CM Punk heel turn. Maybe it was engineered that way from the start. With all of the comments about, you know, Punk from all of his other opponents playing into it, all to build to this moment, 1 year after his arrival, where the veil is lifted, the mask comes off, to reveal the real CM Punk. And it's MJF, of all people, returning to be the savior of AEW. What a payoff that would be. Punk's feud with Kingston, his feud with MJF, his feud with Hangman, nearly all of his opponents, they told the fans, he is not what he pretends to be. What if the payoff is that they were all telling the truth? And Tony Khan has to rely on MJF now in storyline to save his company. Now that's a story. And for AEW's sake, I hope that's all it is.